You're right, actually. That's not a bad point. Who's all asking? You're asking questions? No. Okay, your shadow. Lisa, so I'll pass you the mic when it's your turn. Yes, we met. Yes, I'm excited.
Introductions.
You're doing. You're facilitating.
They're all friendly. They're not. I just feel like I've talked to some people.
No, she's been awesome. I'm shadowing, getting a lot of good information.
Yeah, good. Nice
What
long drive.
matters, what doesn't matter,
Who
doesn't matter.
You know, Lisa went viral. You went. I still think about that. The joggers, the winter storm joggers.
I've seen that. Yeah.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
The entire planet has seen it. And again, I need this written down somewhere. Please don't. Because I'm the only person on the planet who didn't think it was funny because I am the only person on the planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
People from other countries come up to me. I am not making this.
Really? Wow.
So,
Really was a that program's go.
it's cool with it. I'm like, some park, and they're like, oh, they go to Lisa. And my kid, I'm like, what is the deal? You know? I said, I have a
That's pretty funny.
Hey, Dan. I'm gonna have a mic, so when you get called on to ask a question, I'll hand it to you before you speak. So the public.
Yeah. They're funny. Uh-huh.
Oh my God, their stuff is so good.
Yeah.
And they have new stuff out. People are such like Aria, she's like,
Yeah, she was
my
talking.
brother.
And the bats.
Yes, that's it. See, you're up to speed.
How long have you been with Coin?
A week.
Oh, nice. Congrats.
This is week 2. Thank you.
Nice.
Yeah.
How do you work in Eugene?
Yeah, coming up from Eugene.
What do you went to school in Arizona?
Oh, nice. So you just do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just about 2 years.
It's like, oh, like he was like the bicycle. It was like, oh, experience. It's like, still wants to come.
Well, that's good. Do you like Oregon so far?
Yeah, I love it. I grew up coming here. We have a family cabin in La Pine,
Oh, nice.
just south of Bend.
Yeah.
So I grew up like a huge Ducks fan. Always wanted to be up here.
Yeah.
So it's been really fun.
I have to reach out to you because I am my one daughter could be.
You're gonna send her to Romania?
So she's, well, that's interesting.
Oh, come on.
I know, and it's like,
You can't
it's
send
like,
her by herself.
I know, but she's been like, she went to Austria, I went to Paris for a week, like studying, like there's urban like, planning and stuff, like it's fascinating, like all the stuff that she's
Oh my God.
roommates from the college. Her roommate now lives in the three of them, but anyway, Chubby's like got a family, like they're big, so she's gonna go there and see her. But I am over the people, but I'm kind of, I need to get some. She went to Paris for a week with us, okay, and she's never been to lunch with us as well, and it's she's trying to go. So what I did was like this girl, which is probably not a good idea.
All you have
He would know.
He would know. His boots on the ground, eyes on the ground.
What was the last time you were?
Here? I went to Romania in May, but I stayed in Romania. I didn't travel.
You going back?
My cousin just gave birth, so I should go back. But it's expensive to get out there, and it's like I just spent 2 weeks because of jet lag, and there's so much family to see. It's a trip, not a vacation. So I'm gonna go back in 2026, I think. And
Okay, let me know when, because I would love to go.
Yeah. Did you find out what part of the country?
No, I need to look that up.
Maybe that's what Kotek is. But yeah, no, I'll keep you posted if you can meet up with her. Maybe.
Yeah, that would be amazing. But yeah, I thought about telling Pauline about that. She's named after the couple.
Oh,
But she's like, because another break in March, and she's gonna go over to Spain, hike, like go hiking with
I
friends.
trade lives with her for a few months. She wants this job for a few months while I go to Mallorca.
I'm like, no, I said, you should go to Swansea. And I said,
Yeah.
train. I remember that train through the Alps and then got off, Ivory and Point. And I said, I skied. She said, skied? I said, yeah, I was you. I had a backpack. I just got out. I said, I'm here. I should go ski. I said, things I would not do now, but like, I was you. It was like so,
Oh, I love that.
I just feel like life, people just take a chunk out of like a younger years. Trade that. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean. A little bit of right sizing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, okay, yeah, I remember all that, but it's just like, and even if I could go.
Hi, Governor.
Hey there, sorry to be late.
We're gonna start in just a couple of seconds here.
Yeah, why don't we all stand together? Oh, look.
Is that the one?
Yes.
Nice.
We can't mess it up that way. Yeah. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Very much appreciate the Senate President and Speaker of the House joining me as well. So, today we're talking about K-12 education. The Speaker, Speaker Fahey, Senate President Wagner, and I all recognize that we are at a critical moment for our state's education system. We have a state full of incredible students, as well as dedicated educators who work hard every day to make our students' lives better and to help them have successful futures. First off, I want to acknowledge and appreciate all of our educators who work hard every single day to do the best thing they can for their students. But the data is clear. Oregon schools are lagging behind other states. And we're here today to propose a path forward to help more. Two things are true. Our K-12 schools need more resources to give students the best shot to succeed, and they need to be held accountable for student performance. I've already proposed a record $11.3 billion state school fund investment and have a bill in the session to more predictably calculate school funding needs going forward. But I don't believe in writing a blank check, and I don't believe in accepting the status quo when it comes to delivering for our students. Oregon students deserve more. That's why I have a bill this session
with the collaboration of our legislative leaders, then make sure our K-12 investment is actually moving the needle for student outcomes. And I want to thank Speaker Fahey and President Wagner and a lot of legislators who have been tremendous partners in developing the legislation. We're going to give education leaders and Oregon families better visibility into how our students are doing. We're going to make sure that school districts are regularly checking in on outcomes so they have real-time information on what works and what doesn't so they can adjust when needed in the best interest of their students. And when things aren't getting better, I believe it's on us to lean in, get involved, and work with the school districts to get them on the right track. In my conversations with educators and local leaders, a reoccurring theme is the challenge that districts face from extensive reporting requirements, grant applications, and other requests from the state. It stands in the way of doing what they want to do, which is give our students the education they deserve. So in addition to legislation, we need to do a better job focusing our Oregon Department of Education to help our educators and our school districts. We want to give those schools time back to do the work they need to do. So from my end, the Oregon Department of Education, in addition to the legislation, will be holding up their end of the bargain to take specific administrative actions so they can better support districts doing their job. The bottom line is getting public education right is one of the biggest promises we make to Oregonians. Students and families rely on us to make sure the money we spend goes to a high-quality public education that we know works. And the public has been clear. They believe schools must set clear, data-driven goals to improve student outcomes, and that the state should provide guidance and support for districts that need help. So today, as we introduce this legislation, our goal is to support our students and our educators in making sure we get the most out of the investments that we have in our K-12 schools to get the job done. So thank you, and with that, I'm going to pass the mic over to Speaker of the House, Julie Fahey.
Thank you, Governor, and thanks to everyone for being here today as the Governor, the Senate President, and I introduce House Bill 2009 and Senate Bill 141 to renew Oregon's K-12 accountability system. Over the last few years, Oregon has made significant investments in our K-12 education system, but our student outcomes remain amongst the lowest in the nation. That is unacceptable. It's unacceptable to the Governor, the Senate President, and I, and it's unacceptable to educators, families, and administrators all around the state. Our teachers are doing incredible work, often in difficult circumstances, navigating the lasting effects of the pandemic and increasing student needs beyond the classroom. They need and deserve our full support. And that is why strengthening our accountability measures is so critical. These reforms that we are proposing will ensure that school districts receive the resources and the support they need so that teachers can deliver the high-quality education our students deserve. House Bill 2009, along with its companion, Senate Bill 141, will help ensure that as we invest more in our schools, we will see improvements in student outcomes. And we can't afford to wait. We need to be very clear-eyed about the challenges facing Oregon's K-12 education system, and we need to treat the current situation with the urgency it demands. We need genuine accountability and real results for our students now. Oregon students cannot wait for us to get this right down the road. That is why I've made education accountability a top priority in the Oregon House this session, alongside other proven strategies like targeted summer learning programs and research-based early literacy efforts. Oregon's future depends on the choices we make today. House Bill 2009, which will have a public hearing later this afternoon, is about building an education system that is innovative, accountable, and effective, one that truly delivers for our students. Thank you so much.
Thank you to the Governor, to your team for introducing this important legislation that we see introduced this week. The issue of education is the reason I'm in the legislature. Professionally, I've worked as an education advocate for a couple decades, and personally, I graduated the year Measure 5 passed in the Oregon legislature. And I've just, like so many people, have done every role: a student, a parent volunteer, the site council, the school foundation, running and serving on a school board. This is personal to me. I have 4 kids that I've sent through the public schools, and both of my sisters are teachers in our public schools. What I'm so pleased about this legislation that the governor and other education advocates have worked on is that it centers accountability and clarity from the department all the way down through our local schools as it impacts our individual students. It still respects a strong tradition of local control, but building on recent transformational investments in education, the legislation establishes multiple measures, not just a simple test, focusing on what we know are proven supports to lift up schools and lift up students. So I want to thank the governor for taking the lead on this. And the last thing I'll say is you often hear from people about the importance of a return on investment. By investing $1 in our public schools, you generate all kinds of economic return. It's also meaningful in terms of the lives of our students and the future of our state. So thank you for being here.
President. And we're happy to take some questions. I also want to recognize we have Representative Neron here, our House Chair. Thank you for being here.
Before we get started on questions, a couple of ground rules. We'll switch off in person and virtual. Anca has a microphone to give you to speak your question into for the folks virtually. And then please stick to the topic at hand, education questions, since we have limited time. At first, let's get through those.
Thank you, Governor. You've previously spoken about the urgency of reform, but under this bill text, today's kindergartners would be in middle school before the state can actually step in and direct spending. How does that square with the need to make changes quickly for the benefit of today's students?
Well, and just to clarify for folks, if it wasn't clear, we have 2 bills, one in the Senate, one in the House, same bill. We'll have a hearing on the House bill Monday, the Senate bill on Wednesday, I believe. First of all, there's an emergency clause on the bill. We've already directed the State Department of Education to get started on what I would call the administrative streamlining from the agency. One of the things that they will be looking at over the next year is how we take quite a few number of grants that are currently happening in our district. We have a very complex system of programs and funding here in the state. So what the Department of Education is working on, I want to make sure I get the right number, taking 110 grant streams down to 7. So that gives you a sense of the scope of the work the agency is going to do, which I think will have immediate impacts for our districts to be able to work more effectively. So I just want to put that out there right now. In terms of the bill, my understanding is we will have to move forward with rulemaking and things if the bill passes in its current form. But the idea that if we are setting goals for our districts that are based primarily on what the Student Success Act community plans already say they should be focusing on by adding a couple metrics on top of those 5. We're sending a clear message to our districts on day 1 that they are going to be held accountable to those metrics that were also in the Student Success Act, will now be for the entire set of funding that comes to the schools. Mandatory technical assistance could happen as early as the 2029 school year. And if districts are still not succeeding, actually having impact on the way they spend their dollars in the 2030 school year. Now, I hear what you're saying that as soon as we can get at it, we are getting at it. And I don't think the bill should be seen as that is the sole piece that's happening on accountability. But you do need to give a ramp for districts to know what those performance expectations are and to get to that. What I think we're going to see from school districts on day 1 is a response to knowing what the new expectations are, and they are going to start moving accordingly right away. So I wouldn't get hung up on when the timelines actually go into effect, because I think this will show response from districts on day 1. I don't know if either of you want to mention anything.
Yeah, I was, after we passed the Student Success Act in 2019, I was actually the chair of our local school board when we went through the initial outreach and implementation that was required in the legislation. And as we were working through to almost final adoption, 2 months later, coronavirus hit, and it was actually the first case was in the elementary school that was closest to my house. And that sort of threw some of the Student Success Act framework in terms of what was supposed to be the supports that you saw embedded in the legislation into a little bit of uncertainty. One piece of the bill, as I was reading it last night, that I really appreciate is the public focusing of accountability and actually having things where parents and community members will know at the local school level how districts are doing. One thing that I found when I was on a school board is sometimes you would see reports that were brought in and it was just something that kind of got tucked away sometimes in a report by a deputy superintendent. The fact that you're going to have a public vote and you're going to be centering some of these accountability metrics. I can tell you from being on a local school board, as soon as this goes into place, you're going to see behavior starting to change. They're not going to wait until the state ultimately will need to step in. You're going to see school districts starting to align with what the legislation identifies is best practice.
And I'll just add, I think this bill, these two bills, are part of the broader work we're doing on education this session. So as the governor mentioned, investing additional resources in our education system, continuing the work of making sure that some of those resources are directed towards targeted, proven strategies that we know work. Targeted summer learning, early literacy, career and technical education. The work around the accountability system, and then the work the governor referenced around streamlining some of the reporting responsibilities and grant applications for our districts. So that's the holistic picture. On the timeline specifically, I would say, so I was the co-chair of the Accountability and Transparency Subcommittee of the Student Success Committee in 2019. And the intensive support program that we designed and funded through the Student Success Act, we have our first cohort of districts that are going through and have gone through that program. And I think we've learned a fair amount about how those intensive supports are working in those districts and what we might need to do a little bit differently. And so I envision that as sort of a pilot. We're working with a set of districts, including Reynolds in the metro area, and looking to see what we're doing that is working. And so before we expand the program or expand the authorities in it. So I think we'll talk in the hearing this afternoon about timelines and what's exactly right. But to me, we should prove that program works, which I think we've done with this first cohort, and then before we expand the authorities.
I have a question from Tim Kitadamo with Newswatch 12 in Medford, Oregon. How will introducing this legislation help reverse declining test scores, specifically in rural and low-income school districts?
Well, this is all designed to see higher performance from our students. That's why I focused in 2023, and we continue to focus on early literacy because our reading proficiency is not where it should be at third grade and fourth grade and fifth grade. So we're focused on that. And as the speaker said and the Senate President said, we're not starting from scratch. We are reforming what we have, making it stronger and adding to it. And when it comes to the outcomes for our students, we're seeing more focus on instructional materials. We want to make sure that we have more evidence-based materials, that all the districts are using them. There's also a call for more assessments during the school year that are in real time. I know there's a lot of frustration with some of the testing we do because it's a big test that happens and you don't see the results till even after the end of the school year. I am proposing further support for our districts to use these interim assessments where during the school year, they're getting real-time understanding about where their students are so they can continue to work differently throughout the school year. So you're not waiting and catching up, you're continually evaluating where your students are. And remember, there's also a lot of testing that just happens in the classroom without an additional set of assessments. So we all believe in, I think, continuous improvement with our students. We're not going to stand still. We're going to build on what we have and keep adding to the toolkit that districts can have to help their students get to the learning levels that we all know they can achieve.
Hi, Natalie Pate with OPB. I have a clarifying question and then a broader question if you will entertain it. The clarifying question, I hear what you're saying about getting more bandwidth for ODE to be able to do this work. Can you clarify who does the assessments and the coaching for the school districts?
Well, one of the things that we want to make sure the district has is the capacity internally, whether through contracts or with folks in either the agency or with the education service districts, having the skill set provide that type of coaching for our districts. We're not there completely yet, but as Speaker Fahey was mentioning, there has been some development of that as we've done the Student Success Act performative reviews. So we're going to build on that. We want to make sure that both the state and regional partners like our ESDs have what they need. And internally at the department too, there's a new deputy leader there who's focused on operations. We know the agency has to step up their game as well, and we're focused on that.
Oh, thank you. And then my second question, speaking of the existing intensive programs, my understanding is about a dozen school districts have qualified for it, but only 4 have done that opt-in. So in terms of the carrot stick analogy, if you will, these proposed bills are not punitive in nature. They're not removing funding or firing teachers from these metrics, but it does seem like you're trying to give a little bit more teeth to existing programs. Can you speak to the tone of these bills and what your intent is with that?
That intentional and intensive technical assistance will no longer be optional under this bill. It will be mandatory at a certain point in time.
I just have one question here from Joanna Ho at the Willamette Week. What benchmarks will the state use to identify struggling districts, given that most districts report less than half of their students as proficient in reading, math, science? Is individualized school or district intervention the correct strategy forward when the data shows the majority of kids in the state are struggling to keep up?
Well, I think we have to work with our districts. That's where families and students know their educators, know their local school board members. That is the foundation of what we have to do here. I would consider this as a new partnership with our school districts that is a lot more clear on what our expectations are and what our accountability tools are to help them achieve the performance that they all want to have. Everybody wants to see our students succeed. In terms of, what was the other half of that question?
Apologies. In terms of, so is individualized or school or district intervention the correct strategy forward when the data shows that the majority of kids in the state are struggling to keep up?
I do think we have to work with our individual school districts. I think to the first half of that question about once the bill is passed, we'll be working with the State Board of Education for the rules that will answer some of the questions on how we determine the targets that we're asking our districts to have. But what I will say is we do have some districts in the state who have fully embraced the metrics under the Student Success Act. And yes, there were delays because of the pandemic. And you have some districts who are saying, I understand the 5 metrics that were in the Student Success Act. We have been embedding that in all of the work we're doing across our district. I want to make sure that a low-performing district could at least get to as good as the highest performing district in the state. So we're not just going to pick a number out of the air. We want to make sure we can get, if one school district in the state can do it, I believe the rest of them can do it as well.
I think it's something like 85% of most district costs are personnel and fixed expenses. How are you prepared to, if, you know, a significant number of school districts go to the worst case scenario and the state comes in and controls 25% of the budget, what's the plan for negotiating those desires and contract obligations?
Well, I would hope no school district goes to U4 where we have to manage their dollars for them.
But in the case that
But
you
that
do,
is, I mean, like if we have districts who are completely not making it, that's the ultimate, stick that we would have. But I think it's more about saying we're setting expectations, we're providing assistance. We want all of our districts to get where they need to go. I'm not sure if that totally answers your question.
well, I get on the one hand, it sounds like there's not a universe in which you imagine a quarter of Oregon schools going to a 25% control by the Department of Education. But let's say a school district does. I guess what are the guardrails here? What's the plan for going in? If 85% of their district costs are personnel and fixed costs, how does the state really have teeth to control a budget that's contractually obligated before they get there?
Well, I think most systems in the state that provide direct service, and that's what our schools do, is very much focused on the people who do the work. Our goal is to support our educators to do the best job they possibly can, to work with our administrators in these districts to have the best planning they possibly can. I don't believe that the dollars spent on salaries are somehow external to actually getting outcomes for our students. This is about how do you plan as a district to utilize every resource to march in one direction to get the best outcomes. And that is about mobilizing all the available dollars, including, folks are getting paid to do a job. We want to make sure they are clear about what they need to do and support that. In addition, though, we've been trying to do some additional dollars on early literacy for more training. Summer's really important. Those are the additional add-ons there, which I think are very clear that those things also have to help those districts. So we're all committed to that as well.
One last question. Oh, yeah, thanks. Governor, there's a lot of
and some teachers who would say, look, we test enough. Instead of focusing on the testing, we already know we have difficulties and we're not, where we should be. Why not focus on some of the problems that are causing this, such as the absenteeism, some of those kinds of things where smaller class sizes, for example. Why not focus on the problems we know are there and put the money towards those problems that end up resulting in the kids not being able to learn what they need to know?
Well, I don't think it's all about testing. I mean, one of the metrics in the Student Success Act was regular attendance. And I've been talking about attendance and chronic absenteeism. If we don't have students in the seats, they're not going to learn. So attendance continues to be one of those metrics. We're adding a metric for kindergarten assessment, K2 attendance, because we know if students are attending, particularly in those early years, that sets them up for future success. That's not an assessment issue. But I think we would all agree that we have to have some method by which we know if we're succeeding. And what we have in our bill is focusing on those more periodic assessments within the school year that gives real-time information. I will agree. I think our SBAC assessment that is done once a year and it's required by the federal government and you don't see the results till after the school year has to be reconsidered. But right now we're not focusing on that. We're focusing on, can we get different assessments? And a lot of districts are doing this now. We'd like to see consistency across the districts with these different types of assessments that are actually providing better information in real time. I don't know if you-
I agree with that. I would also say that, reiterate the point that the outcome metrics in the Student Success Act include attendance, they include four-year high school graduation rates and five-year completion. So those are important measures of success that are not linked to test results. And I also want to make the point that test results can be an important indicator for us of what's working and what's not working. I would highlight in the Bethel School District in my community had an amazing 7-week intensive summer program last summer focused on kids between kindergarten and third grade who were struggling with reading. It was a literacy-focused intervention. And they partnered with educators at the University of Oregon to track the reading performance on tests for the kids who were eligible for that program and didn't attend, and the kids who were eligible and did attend. So they will be able to say, did this 7-week intervention really work? If not, what do we need to change about it next summer? If it did work, how can we get more students participating, and how can we replicate that program all around the state? So I do think assessments can help us figure out what's working and what's not working, and where do we need to make some changes.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Watch the hearing. We appreciate you all. Thanks.